Hello everyone and welcome back to my dream world. Sorry that updates have been a little slower, but I still wanted to get this video out for you because it's been a long time coming. And also apologies if my voice is a little bit messed up because I'm on the tail end of a pretty bad cold that I had last week. But hopefully everything's going to be fine. Today I'll be ranking Ninjago Season 4 episodes. I said I was going to do this a while ago and I'm finally getting around to it, so I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it because I don't want this video to be too long. This is all my subjective opinion, and if you want to share yours after the video, please leave it down in the comments, but I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. So at number 10 I have A Spy for a Spy. I just want to put down really quickly that I don't think any of these episodes are bad. This is just a very strong season, so the ones on the tail end of this list aren't necessarily episodes I dislike or hate or anything. It's just, weaker side of a stronger season. For a Spy, I just find it to be quite messy and disorganized, and thus a poor transition. It's kind of between Act 1 and Act 2 of the story, so it's just not a great bridge, and it's just a little frustrating to watch. In general, all the elemental masters, especially Neuro, switch up on the ninja super fast in this episode, which is kind of annoying. There's also Nia's side plot that has started, which really only lasts for this episode, which is honestly a little disappointing because Nia was actually really funny during this plot, and it was a much improved moment for her compared to the previous season. Her fight with Klaus is actually really funny, and I did find Dareth annoying, but I'm happy that he was able to initiate his skill with apparent makeup expertise, and I'll give him props. He did hold his own against Chen's followers for a little while, but other than that, I was like, why is he here? Like, he's just gonna be a nuisance. We also get down to who the actual mole amongst the elemental masters is, and we find out the twist that Skylar is in fact Chen's daughter. It was an interesting moment, but personally I found it a little bit obvious. Cole's plot continues to go really well as he reunites with Zane, and since these two are my favorites, I absolutely love their dynamic. It was actually really great in this episode, definitely the better part of this episode, and I also think that the little attention to details, like the kabuki paint being on the book and Chen acknowledging that it gets everywhere, that's really great. I like those little parts of this season, attention to detail, but the main reason why this episode is in last place is because of how quickly the Elemental Alliance falls apart. I'm talking less than an episode. Nero is a flip-flopper, and Skylar was way too suspicious during the scene where they're trying to find the spy, which made it much more obvious that she was up to something. I even clocked it as a child. So, yeah, this episode is just messy and frustrating compared to the rest. It's not bad, but the rest of the episodes in this season are either objectively better or more enjoyable to watch. At number 9, I have The Greatest Fear of All. This whole episode is basically everybody trying to find Pythor because Chen realizes that the spell that made them anacondrae will wear off if they don't get a true essence of an anacondrae. Of course, Pythor's not super happy to see the ninja, but he also doesn't like what Chen is doing because it's disrespectful towards his bloodline, so he's semi-willing to help the ninja. He also drops the bomb that it was in fact Chen who lied to the Serpentine as well, which caused the entire war all those years ago. So yeah, Chen's unhinged. The enforcement in Ninjago is super incompetent, by the way. Don't even get me started. This is not the first time we see Cryptarium being a mess, the police force being a mess. We're not even going to get into that. It'll take too much time. The only thing that really happens other than the whole Pythor mess is that Chen sends a bunch of his trucks out, which caused the Elemental Masters to split up and take them out. But this ends up backfiring because the trucks that he sent only had one member of his army and thus allowed him to storm Ninjago with the rest of his crew and leave the rest of the Elemental Masters separated. Again, not a bad episode, but I just find it probably the least engaging of the entire season. So for the penultimate episode of the season, i.e. right before the finale, it didn't really get me super hyped until the very end. And for some reason it just feels rushed, which causes the finale to feel a little bit underwhelming, at least the first half of it. Like the second half of the finale, that's a different story, but the first half of it, like the lead-in is not great. So it's like it just falls flat a little bit. And the reason I have it above number 10 is because I found it a little bit less frustrating to watch, and Pythor was actually hilarious in this episode, so it gets a boost from that. At number 8, I have Spellbound. The action in this episode is really good. We start with the iconic getting dumped out of the blimp and get a great scene between Jay and Klaus. Like it was entertaining action wise. I also like the foreshadowing about how conquering your fear is really what brings out your strength. The conversation between Lloyd and Garmadon centers around a huge theme of this season, which is fear. And this is also the episode where we get a bunch of lore, which is a great build up for the rest of the season and the plots that it's going to tackle. Cole's arc is also great during this episode. He's managed to unite all of the elemental masters that have been eliminated, which speaks to his role as a leader, and they all come up with a plan to escape. If you haven't seen my season 4 review, I found Cole very, very consistent and entertaining during this season, and this arc that he has is a huge part of it. Great foreshadowing of fear being one of the greatest factors in the rest of this season. The Garmadon lore is there, and the fact that Chen has been insane since day one. The callback to Arcturus, Mistake, the rest of the Sacred Flutes, there's a lot thrown in here. However, given what we do know about Garmadon, it does feel a little inconsistent in some places. The timeline feels a little bit wonky. I elaborated on this in my season review and realized that if I think about it too hard, my brain's gonna explode. Maybe I'm slow, but I feel like not everything in the lore lines up in Ninjago, and that's just kind of an issue with the show in itself. One thing that I found funny but also kind of annoying is that a lot of people were really, really dumb in this episode. Kai has a dumb moment where he doesn't take off his parachute after landing on a freaking volcano, which is funny, but also it's like, buddy, what, come on. Shade didn't even try to use his powers when he got jumped. I mean, maybe he was too far in the sun to use his power. I don't know, but I was kind of like, dang, man, like, you can kind of disappear into the shadows and try to juke them like you did to everybody else in this season, but for some reason he didn't do it here. Skylar was an absolute idiot for using ice in front of Kai. Girly. That made it so easy for Kai to immediately clock her as the spy since Zane had never been in the tournament. She could have been a little more subtle about it. I just think these minor cop-outs and silly moments is why this episode isn't higher, because there are a lot of great things here. It just isn't as entertaining as the rest of the season. At number 7, I have the Corridor of Elders. Okay. Before anyone comes swinging at my head, let me be clear. All of the rest of the episodes on this list are great. I had a super hard time ranking all of them because I like all of them. And if I was strictly ranking by the last 7 to 8 minutes of this episode, it would be top 3, easily. However, I do have some issues. The action for the first half of the battle feels really inconsistent and weird. The Elemental Masters were barely able to put a dent in Chen's army before they unlocked their powers, but suddenly these random people are able to fight them off. It just doesn't feel right and takes away some of the tension, especially since none of them actually really end up using the dragons that they've unlocked at all. And also the hold the line moment felt very corny to me. Also, I don't like that Chen suddenly drops the bomb about Garmadon forging Wu's letter to Misako, which causes Wu to rightfully be angry, but be completely forgiven by the end of the episode. I think it would have been more appropriate for Chen to drop this bomb earlier, and it's not like Misako was all, okay, never mind, I won't get into that. This isn't a channel for me to hate on all of the women in this show, but if you recall season 2, you might kind of peep what I was trying to refer to here. One final point, I don't blame Kyler fans if they hate Dareth for interrupting Kai and Skylar's kiss, because that was very frustrating. I'm honestly shocked that Kai didn't whoop him for that, because I probably would have, and I say this as someone who doesn't feel super strongly about Kyler one way or another. That is the ship between Kai and Skylar. But enough with the negativity, let's get into the good stuff. Pythor has a slight redemption moment, of course, and it doesn't last long, but I like that he stays true to his ideals as a true Anachondri, and decides to take a stand against Chen's army without completely throwing away his villainy. And he's the only one that ends up presenting the team with their solution, which leads to my next point. The only surefire solution that they have is for Garmadon to sacrifice himself, since he's the one who banished the original Anachondri. Obviously, Lloyd doesn't take this very well, and this starts a whole nother spiral of daddy issues, but I'll stick to the present. It's very, very sad once you fully absorb it. Lloyd's relationship with Garmadon is very complicated, and all of what they went through in the first 3 seasons, and they're finally hitting a healthier, stable place, and it just gets thrown away. This flashback scene, yeah, it's an emotional moment. Not a flawless season finale, which is why it's not higher, but that just speaks to how strong the rest of the season is, because like I said, the last 7 to 8 minutes of this episode easily would have made this top 3. It's just the lead up to it wasn't as good. I wish it was a little stronger, because otherwise this episode would probably be goated. At number 6, I have Day of the Dragon. So this episode seems to be a mixed bag in the fandom, at least compared to some of the rest of the season. It kind of serves as the bridge between Act 2 and Act 3 of this season. Again, action is really good, especially the chase scene with Skylar and Garmadon's fight with Klaus. I also think that this is Skylar's best episode of the season, because she sees straight through Chen's BS at this point and clocks it. Great scene with the dragons. At the end, we find out our boy Jacob is in fact alive. So if you're a fan of Jacob, yay. But I also really like this episode for Zane's character. He's not as prominent anymore because he's gone through this huge change. Apparently, even Ninjroids have anxiety, so I relate to him in that. He has a new body. He doesn't completely remember what he was like before having this new body. And I like that he clarifies that he just doesn't remember everything from his previous self. And that makes me a little sad. If you didn't watch my rebooted episode, I mentioned a theory headcanon that I've seen that the old Zane from season 1 through 3 is gone, since he's never really been the same for the rest of the show after this. And moments like these kind of support this ideal, especially when he says, "I'm just a replica." Crap, I'm actually getting emotional. But it ends with him reclaiming his identity, similar to how he does in season 1. And conquering his fear is a really big moment for him here, and he's one of the first ninja, along with Kai, to unlock his elemental dragon. I guess I'll get into some of my complaints, though. The way Chen's army goes from practically useless to way too strong is very jarring. And this is why I say, good guys need to stop being good guys and just unalive their enemies before— oh, right, it's a kid's show. My bad. In all seriousness, Chen's army takes this opportunity to get the heck out of there and go after Ninjago City. Of course, it's Ninjago City, always. Like, why do people still live there at this point? I would have moved away after the Devourer, easily. I do also have to note that we haven't been properly introduced to Vengestone yet, other than brief references earlier this season and in season 1 even, but I find this to be an issue because the chains that block our powers, quote unquote, feel like a plot device. And also I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of a lead up to Kai facing a fear and unlocking his dragon, because I feel like that could have been such an awesome scene. Solid episode with a lot of great moments, but it has some flaws that kind of leave it being a middle ground episode for this season. At number 5, I have The Forgotten Element. Cults are weird. That's what I got from the intro of this episode. But that aside, we're introduced to Chop and Kapow. I also definitely didn't absorb how creepy Nia and Garmadon being tied up around a bunch of skulls was when I was a kid. I guess it just flew over my head. Chen also shows how heartless he is when he calls Garmadon's bluff about hurting Skylar. This is a major turning point for her too, because she realizes that her dad was willing to sacrifice her for his own gain, with little to no remorse. I know some people feel iffy about Skylar's turnaround, but this scene speaks to me as the moment where she realizes her dad has little to no empathy for her, and thus it fuels her to actually make the switch. I also just love seeing the Elemental Masters group together for an awesome escape scene. I love this episode because we get Chen's motivation as a villain. He is massively insecure, and that's why he feels the need to take from other people, especially when he gets manipulating Kai, which is pretty messed up. Kai ends up being a double agent by tricking Lloyd into fighting Chen, who gets whooped in his fight, by the way. It's honestly a little hard to watch, and thus giving him what he wants, but only for a moment. Because with Chen's guard down, Kai snatches the staff. Of course, this is bad because it starts corrupting him, but he ends up breaking the hold on that corruption, and he's able to destroy the staff. And this right here is why Kai was never meant to be the Green Ninja, and why his season 1 through 5 appearances are amazing. We wouldn't have gotten this awesomeness if he was the Green Ninja like some of you Delulu fans want him to be. Yes, I'm calling you out as a Kai fan. I don't care. We would have gotten Moro 2.0. Oops, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but I stand by this opinion. Really good episode, a really good wrap up for Act 2 of this season, and has some great moments for Cole, for Kai, just in general. I find this episode a tad bit underrated, actually. So now we get to the top 4. All of these are very, very good episodes. So really, I hold them all roughly equally, but I'm still going to rank them. So at number 4, I have our premiere, The Invitation. First of all, this is a very solid and engaging premiere, probably my favorite premiere of the series so far. I've seen this episode so many times that I immediately am able to find the spot where Lloyd's eye is when we see this shot. Also, I did not catch at the beginning of this episode that Lloyd is doing a simulation to see if the golden armor is secure. This is why I rewatch shows constantly. I like that each of the ninja are handling the loss of Zane differently and that it's touched on for each of them. Lloyd tries to regroup the team, some of our antagonists show up, and this causes them to take action. I remember seeing this and being like, dang, these are our antagonists? They are so weak. Little did I know the extent of the plan that they have. Cole is super iconic during the food fight scene, by the way, though I will say it's a little weirdly edited and had some very random moments that make it feel a little cornier. Kai's fight with Karloff is really good. Kai fans are going to come at me again, but I'm going to be honest when I say Kai low-key got whipped during this fight, y'all. But I will say his BIQ, battle IQ, for those of you who don't know, really shines this season. And it improves as the fight goes on, especially with his observation about how people's powers work and using his environment to his advantage. This is very important because he does it again in a future episode and during his fight with Ash, which is a whole nother video that I got for you guys. I guess my main complaint, though, is the whole adding someone new to the team. It was supposed to kind of reel in audiences when we were hinted at Skylar possibly being a new ninja or whatever, but it just feels like that was a little unneeded and unnecessary. Also, some of the odd edits that the older season have, like Nia laughing after Cole burps up his fortune thing, but that's just a general note of inconsistency. But otherwise, I love the slight foreshadowing by showing us casual versions of our antagonists. I also love Lloyd calling out Kai on the "it should have been me" moment. Again, some Kai fans are still salty about the whole Green Ninja thing, but genuinely, as somebody who loves Kai and as somebody who loves this season, his arc was set up super, super well here, and it goes through pretty much for the rest of the season. I also love the continuity and that we get a lot of differences in character. These new elemental masters are noted to not be like the ninjas. Some of them are implied to not be great people, and I think that's a good thing. Not everybody wants to be your hero when they find out that they have special abilities. Great intro to a fantastic season, and I think everything sets up really, really well, hence why this is a top 4 episode for sure. At number 3, I have Only One Can Remain. This is the episode where we find out that Garmadon knows Chen very well. He had a huge hand in the Serpentine Wars that we've been hearing about, and he also reveals that he in fact was trained by Chen, which is a little confusing to me considering Ninjago's timeline and stuff, but I digress. This explains Garmadon's behavior from the premiere though, which I think is really good. We also are officially introduced to Chen, our main antagonist, and we see how he acts, which is completely unhinged. When Garmadon says that he has a penchant for theatrics, pretty much a nail in the coffin. And we eventually find out this is how he masks his manipulative and kind of psychotic nature. But the first round of the tournament begins, a lot goes on, so I'll focus on the main takeaways. Klaus definitely immediately reveals that he's trying to sabotage the ninja, and Garmadon basically becomes their bodyguard at this point. Kai and Karloff end up facing each other again, and while Karloff does seemingly come on top, Kai takes advantage of his cockiness and takes the last Jade Blade at the last second. See, we have a BIQ king here, and it happens again in a later fight too, so props to Kai. He will not lose, even if he is losing. He's like, nope, I am taking this W. I will find a way to take this W. The ninja regroup after Karloff's elimination and are kind of like, ooh, what actually happens to the losers? And Garmadon kind of points out that them sticking together as a team actually might be a bad thing, which is proven in the next few episodes. And of course, we find out Chen's true motive when he takes Karloff's powers. I don't have any clear weaknesses for this episode other than the fact that they reuse Skylar's line. I'm sorry that I was cold to you earlier. I don't know why, but that always kind of bothered me because it feels lazy that they just reuse that line in two different places. It's the exact same line, exact same recording. I don't know, it feels lazy, and that does take away from the series, but I do love this episode overall. I love Chen's obsession with the Anacondrae and how it's introduced almost immediately. It stays consistent throughout the entire season, especially when we figure out his end goal. I also love that the idea of this tournament is not who's the best fighter or who's the most powerful, but who can use their powers to achieve their goals best. This becomes very clear in the next episode too. Let's think about it. If it was based on power, obviously the ninja would sweep. But the situation that they're given makes them really have to rely on wits and battle IQ instead, which makes it way more engaging and way less certain that they're gonna move on. All the fights in this episode were good. I love how each of the elemental masters, even the ones that aren't highlighted very much, have their own personalities. If you watch each one of them individually every time you watch this episode, which I definitely didn't do, I definitely haven't rewatched this multiple times back to back, by the way, but it only adds on to the season, in my opinion. Consistency is great. Even in the humor, where Kai acknowledges that Klaus's snake is in fact not the biggest snake that we've seen in Ninjago. I also just overall love the team dynamics between the ninja throughout this entire episode, so that's why it gets such a high spot. At number 2, I have Ninja Roll, aka not Ninja Ball Run. People confuse those names a lot, but I had a really, really hard time picking between these top two because they're both so good. But eventually, I settled on putting Ninja Roll second. At this point, we have about 3 different plot lines going on here, so I'll briefly cover each of them. Skylar versus Jacob is kind of a neat fight because we get to learn more about how Skylar's powers work and the fact that she is not related to Kai. The ninja kind of begin to realize that sticking together has in fact put a target on their back, along with Chen targeting them, and this becomes very apparent during the next fight, which is Lloyd versus Camille. Of course, we think, or at least I thought when I first saw this episode, this is gonna be easy. What's she gonna do? Turn him into a cactus or something? That would actually be kind of cool, but because of this, Chen made this round very, very unique. This is a power or energy. They use so many different names for Lloyd's power, like just go along with it. But this is Lloyd versus manipulation and social strategy, because this fight ends up being everybody against the ninja. The only one who I kind of side-eye here is Neuro, because he does know about the whole situation regarding Chen. He could have at least tried to play double agent, but I understand why he did it. I would want to be on the winning side too, and siding with the ninja would cause suspicion. Of course, this is also just Chen trying to rig the match to get Lloyd's powers, because otherwise Camille would have been toast. Her powers are not very combat conducive in a 1v1 fight. So eventually the ninja realize that they need to be honest with the others if they want to stop getting ganged up on. And once Neuro backs them up, everyone except Shade and Tox come to their side. Of course, Chen tries to rig the match and eliminate Lloyd regardless, but with the majority of the remaining contestants siding with the ninja, Camille gets eliminated fair and square. As for Cole, he's made friends with Karloff while working in the noodle factory, who quickly becomes one of my favorite side characters. He has cooled down a lot without his powers and is much, more lovable, I guess. The TV show also tricks you into believing that Jacob gets eaten, but more importantly, Cole hears Zane talking to Pixel and the two briefly reunite. We love Karloff for being a real G and covering for Cole despite things being risky for him too, by the way. Nia continues her own mission by camouflaging herself as a noodle truck and ends up having to deal with Dareth, who is mad that his favorite noodle house dish has been discontinued. The way I literally would have knocked him out so fast instead of pulling him inside, but I guess he does come in handy the next episode, so I'll leave it alone. I guess my biggest complaint is Nero, you're a fake. I'm not going to say the next few words I was about to say, but if you've watched Bad Girls Club, you probably know what I was about to say. And Kai Sweetie, you probably should have done everyone a favor and just sat down on the sidelines or something, because that's what I would have done. I would have wiped out so fast if I had to roller skate. I can only, barely ice skate, but while this episode may not be perfect, I do think it ends up being my personal favorite of the season because I did find it entertaining all the way through. There's no moment where my focus dips. I was engaged the whole time on all sides of the story at this point. I just think there's one episode that does a little bit more for this season. And with that, at number one, Versus. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone because this episode is widely regarded as very strong, especially for this season, because there's a lot going on. I'll start with Zayn. He's having these crazy visions, doesn't completely remember things, and Pixel kind of has to jog his memory, but then we find out Pixel has been scrapped. So Zayn decides to literally put Pixel in his head. I know people have issues with this, and honestly, I get it. I agree to an extent, and it goes on for way too long. But in this moment, I was like, thank God, because I stand these two, especially at this point, so much. However, he's caught by Klaus before he can escape. But the meat of this episode is with the ninja and the tournament. The Jay versus Cole rivalry is still quite heated. But before we tackle that, let's get into the first few fights. Turner versus Gravis, meh. I mean, it took them way too long to get the Jade Blade considering their powers, so it felt super, super dragged out. And the most damage that happened is that Gravis throws flowers on Turner. Okay, but it was still cool to see the contrast of these new elemental powers, so I won't complain too much. Bolobo versus Nero is a little bit more interesting. This is kind of a battle of power versus strategy, and we see how knowing your element and the different ways to use it is super important. Bolobo totally could have won this fight if he was just a little bit less cocky and a little bit faster, because Nero's ability to disorient Bolobo with a migraine saved him during this fight. He almost screwed himself over by turning his back and then getting snatched. I've seen this fight too many times, I'm sorry. But my only complaint is that it was way too easy for them to retrieve the Jade Blade, and once again, this fight felt a little bit drawn out. And Nero's powers are a little inconsistent and confusing, because I still don't know what this was. I guess he just created brainwaves of some kind. Whatever, it's like telekinesis. But then there's also my favorite 1v1 fight, at least out of all the seasons. Kai versus Ash. I love this fight so much. I'm gonna make a whole separate video on this just so I can rant about my insane hyperfixation on this fight. So if you want to see that, let me know. But of course, Kai moves on. There's no way they would eliminate him in the first round. That would be ridiculous. But a twist comes in where the matches have now been switched, which puts Cole against Jay. And Jay is not happy about this. I don't blame him, because given what we've seen so far, Cole is definitely more consistently competent in battle and is considered the better fighter. So it's like, Jay kind of knows that he's going to take the L here. They try to enlist Nero as a new potential ally, who makes a good point about it being in his best interest to work against them. But once he sees what Chen is up to, he's kind of like, okay, yeah, I'll help y'all out. During the fight, Cole and Jay duke it out pretty seriously. Cole gets the upper hand as expected, but he realizes, I need to stop this rivalry. They finally decide to put their differences behind them, but this makes Chen mad, and he tries to eliminate both of them. Jay convinces Cole to go for the blade, but Cole is like, nope, I'm taking the fall, and gets eliminated from the tournament. I have a few complaints, even though I love this episode, love this episode, but I do want to acknowledge a few things. I didn't need to hear Nia's rant about the whole love triangle BS. I don't blame Sensei for taking a nap and trying to avoid the situation. Yes, at this point, I still couldn't stand Nia because of the hot mess that is the love triangle, but she did get a lot better this season later on. Also, why did I feel so bad for Garmadon when they couldn't give him biscuits? There are also some inconsistencies with the brackets and everything. Jay was originally matched up against Mr. Pale, so why was he considered quote-unquote moved on? Karloff is the only one who has been kicked out at this point, and definitely that was an error, and it's been acknowledged because they all got switched around at this point. My last complaint, Cole honey, I'm not appreciating the she's your line, which was a reference to the love triangle as well. You already have a new boy. Oh. Whoops, I'm 13 seasons ahead, my bad. Point being, I don't care for that line, because Cole was never really into Nia. For those of you who don't believe me, creators have confirmed it. I'll insert it right here. And was mostly just trying to spite Jay and get attention. But other than that, this is a fantastic episode. 2 iconic fights. And the beef between Cole and Jay is finally squashed, making for a very satisfying yet slightly bittersweet ending due to Cole being eliminated. But this opened up so many doors for the next part of the season with Cole's arc and the team taking the next steps against Chen. So I think it did a really good job of setting that up. Definitely one of the most impactful and entertaining parts of the season. So that's my ranking. Again, it's subjective, and if you disagree with me, that's totally cool. I just ask that you, if you do comment, that you be respectful. I'd love to hear your thoughts. My next video will either be a new Disney series that I want to start or the Kai versus Ash analysis before I get into Possession. If people have opinions about this, please let me know. I can make a poll, but otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!